You're live.
Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2022. It is 9:02 a.m. This session is set to go until 10 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have our County Manager, Ramiro Chavez, as well as our Assistant County Manager, Robin Campbell. And we have guests today to discuss the WSAC meeting with county, and this is the Washington State Association of Counties. And we have our President Eric Johnson joining us, as well as the board chair, Jamie Stevens, joining us, and as well as Deborah Munguia, our hobbies. So with that.
So good morning and welcome. I believe we couldn't have this meeting earlier in the year, just the conflicts didn't and the schedules didn't allow, but I personally look forward to always have Eric in the room, as well as the chair of WSAC, to give a perspective, have the opportunity for the Board of County Commissioners to have a conversation. So really it's your time, your floor, Eric, and I don't know if Commissioner Stevens would like to kick off this meeting, but.
Yeah, I'll let Councilmember Stevens, who is our current president, he is a San Juan County Council member, he's finishing his 12th term, and they're a charter county. 12th year, 12th term.
I said 12th term, that is commitment.
It just seems like 12 terms, Commissioner. His 12th year, which is his final year because they have term limits in San Juan County via their charter. So, Councilmember Stevens, you want to say a few things? And he and I have worked this out that I will take the lead here, and he'll play color commentary from time to time and chime in. And anytime you have questions, please don't hesitate. So, Councilmember Stevens.
Sure. Thank you very much to all of you for making the time to meet with us today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but if there's one good thing about the pandemic is at least I can participate this way. So I'm really happy to be a part of this meeting. And as I said, we're here to, as Ramiro said, we're here to give you kind of the state of the Association of Counties. We're healthy, but we're always looking forward. And as with everything, what I appreciate about these meetings is we're here to tell you about the association, but we're really here to listen to your thoughts and your individual thoughts and issues and concerns about what's going on in your county and in the state. And further, we're only as strong as our members. And I would like to thank the commissioners of Thurston County for your participation in the Association of Counties on boards and commissions, as well as the board of directors and legislative steering committee. Without everybody's input on those committees, we just wouldn't be as strong. Also, I just want to throw in one more thing here is that through the pandemic, WSAC did the virtual assemblies, and we've invited many guests and presenters. And as a very positive result of that, many state agencies, as well as administrators, have now started contacting Eric and the Association of Counties to be involved in rulemaking. We all know that the legislature has tended in the past few years to pass a law and leave the actual details out and leave it up to rulemaking with the agencies. So because of participation, and they've invited WSAC in turn to be a part of that rulemaking. And we couldn't do that unless the association members step up to participate and be a part of that. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Great. Well, thank you, Councilor Stevens. He has been a trooper with us. I think this is our 21st, where our goal is 22 courthouse briefings this year, and most of them have all been in person. So we've driven and dined our way through the state of Washington over the last this year. So you did not invite me to South Carolina, I will note though. So, but really do appreciate Councilmember Stevens. And I really do want to extend, similar to Councilmember Stevens, my thanks to all of you. You all professionally and or for elected officials and professional staff have really just been engaged with us, and we really, really do appreciate that. It's exciting for us to have, both at the professional level and at the elected official, a really engaged county. So thank you all very much. So I have 3 documents, and I'm primarily going to stay in the courthouse briefing document, but there are 2 other documents. One seems dated now since we are well into launching into our 2023 legislative session planning and our 2023 federal issues planning. So we'll touch a little bit on those, but for the most part, we're going to stay within the courthouse briefing document. Just to remind you, our primary client is the 139 county commissioners, county council members, and the 4 county executives. That is our primary client. And beneath that, though, are all the departments that are beneath either the boards or the county executives. And those are our secondary clients. So you can see a little bit of that. The County Engineers Association, the local public health officials, obviously has been a huge part of what we have done for the past 3 years. County administrators, now we have solid waste managers as an active client. We have County Human Services, Association of County Human Services, IT directors, planning directors, clerks of the boards and councils. So all of those types of folks that are beneath you are kind of the secondary client, and we work very closely with all of those affiliates. In fact, have in some cases contractual relationships to deliver them services directly. That's our secondary clientele. We do not work for the independent elected officials. While we have had contractual services to deliver them, for example, we delivered training services and conference services for the county auditors for a number of years. But we're not doing that now, but we have had some side for relationships with the independent elected officials, but they have a separate association. We work closely with them, Washington Association of County Officials, and work closely with the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. All of those types of groups we work closely with, but we do not deliver services directly to them. And then we work closely with the Superior Court Judges Association, Municipal and District Court Judges Associations, all of the kind of the partnerships we have with other local government associations, Association of Washington Cities, Public Courts Association, et cetera. So really close relationships with others. On page 4, you see a little bit about our board of directors, our governance, and how that actually take a look at that. We rotate east-west on our leadership, so we will be electing someone from the east this time. And so we're constantly seeing both, that provides us both a geographic balance, but it also does provide us a political balance. As all of you know, we bring Republicans, Democrats, nonpartisans, independents, but we do have that perspective. So having leadership that reflects that is really, really important. This provides us the opportunity to have that. Our board is comprised of a representative from each of our 10 urban counties. Those counties are described as those counties over 180,000 in population. Benton County is the least populous of that, just now almost about 200,000 people, all the way up to King County with 2.2 million. So that's the 10 urban counties. Then there's 4 regional representatives from the west and 4 regional representatives from the east. And then our 4 officers make that, as well as our past presidents have made who our board of directors is, and you can see who the alternates are in relationship to that. Commissioner Minzer is your representative on the board. Commissioner Edwards is the alternate. Commissioner Mejia serves on a legislative steering committee that we'll get through. So your board is very active in a variety of these areas. So thank you very much. The board, does not get into public policy. That really rests with our legislative steering committee. So this is really a true bifurcation of responsibilities. The board sets the strategic direction, oversees the financial affairs for the organization, oversees our litigation program. So it has a variety of set of responsibilities, looking at making sure that we are fulfilling the direction that is provided to the board, from the board to our staff. There's no question, for me, having been in and around county government, I hate to say, but you can do the math. I started working for Lewis County in 1984 as a park manager at Mayfield Lake County Park. I was in Parks and Recreation professionally. Had worked for the city of Bellingham, came down thinking that Lewis County would be a better place than Bellingham. I'm not always sure what I was thinking, but it was a professional move. It was great to be there. And that really started this relationship with county government. I worked for the county for a number of years. I had a brief hiatus going to a state agency in Parks and Recreation. for about 10 years, and then came back as a Lewis County Commissioner, and I've been now since the late 90s back in county government, so for a long time. And great stories. My peers here at the time was, obviously it's changed, but Diane Overquell was certainly, and Judy Wilson. There's a number of folks that you will remember that were commissioners during that period of time. So had a great working relationship, and so I got to know a number of things with Thurston. So it's a great thing, but there's no question the last 2.5 to 3 years have been some of the most challenging in county government over that period of time. And so that's whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the politics, whether it's the challenges of operating virtually and delivering a virtual government, just a really challenging period of time. And so my hat's off to all of you that have worked through this period of time. And there's one great thing that has been through this period of time is that we've been pretty financially stable. Now that's not a long-term element. I'm sure Robin and Romero have been talking to you about that while we have been pretty financially stable through the pandemic, that is, and Commissioner Edwards, you've seen the ebbs and flows of good financial times and bad financial times, and these are really challenging times that I think we're heading back into. So how do we meet the demands of salary increases, with inflation, with potentially the boom in sales tax not being sustainable, federal monies that have been able to support us during this period of time not being sustainable, that we're probably re-entering a period of time where budgeting might be a little more difficult in years ahead. On pages 8 and 9, you see a little bit about, and 10 actually, it's a little bit about the WSAC summary of our financials. Never the most exciting thing to talk about, but just really important to note that we are pretty financially stable as an organization. We have our board of directors pays a lot of attention to this. We do a 4-year budget outlook as well when we adopt a budget, making sure that it is sustainable going out into a 4-year period with some base assumptions. Our major revenue increases that have occurred over this period of time more recently, and that's on page 9, you see that 7-year revenue trend, is when we started our litigation program. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we've been delivering in that and what we continue to deliver. That's a big revenue change. That was a major new revenue source of $400,000 in revenue. And then a little bit more in some of our contractual services. We've taken on some contracts and some services, and those are shown in blue. We'll talk a little bit more about those as we talk about program services. Most of our revenue is kind of balanced between what we do in advocacy, what we do in member services. We're back into getting away from just everything being virtual, but going back into in-person meetings and in-person activities, in-person training activities. We expect our legislature to be back in person this session, so we'll having the Legislative Steering Committee back in person. Our Board of Directors has transitioned to back in person. So most of our meeting activities are starting to transition back to being in person, but I think most of our business type meetings will remain hybrid. I think we're pretty committed to that environment, whether it's because of a public health issue or simply because for a Stevens County Commissioner to travel 6.5 hours for a 2-hour meeting and then 6.5 hours back, it really does make sense for them to potentially be able to participate in a virtual environment. You can see our cash balance on the bottom of page 10. We're a small business. We generally operate around a $4 million budget on an annual basis. And part of our challenge is we've got to maintain cash flow is one of our biggest pieces that we've got to be able to do. And so having cash balance, we've also been advised by kind of in our audit process is, we have 3 counties, King, Pearson, Snohomish, that comprise well over or about 50% of our annual dues. And so, from a risk perspective, that's a pretty high risk to have 50% of your budget coming from those. So we've often been counseled by our audits is that you probably should think about a risk reserve, and we haven't necessarily built to that potential of having 50% of our dues being held in reserve just in case something might happen with one of those partners. Going pretty fast. If anyone does have any questions, don't hesitate to ask about that or any of anything on our financial side. Advocacy is oftentimes seen as probably by many folks as one of the main things we do. That is advocacy, really all 3 branches of government. We are spending a lot of time, obviously, with the legislative branch of government, whether that's the elected legislators themselves, whether that's legislative staff, nonpartisan staff, caucus staff, et cetera, spending time with them. Spending time with the executive branch, both at the governor's office, department heads, all of those elements within the executive branch. And then we have been probably more active because of the Blake decision with the administrative courts, making sure we're working through systems that work for clerks, prosecutors, judges, and obviously how to pay for that, which is our biggest interest. The clerks, the judges, and the prosecutors obviously operationally are dealing with that, but we are wanting to make sure constantly that there's a good process to seek reimbursement from the administrative courts, but also that there's resources available to that. We'll talk about late litigation here in a second as well.
Eric, could I break in for a second?
Yes.
Just, I'd just like to reiterate a little bit of what Eric just went over, that 3 years ago, our staff was mainly concerned with our legislative advocacy. They'd really kind of ease off after session, regroup, figure out where we are, begin planning for the next legislative session. But as Eric was just saying, and I said earlier, being more involved in some of the regulations and the Blake decision has brought our staff into the other departments, both the governor's office as well as the courts. And so our staff is much busier than they were 3 years ago. Or maybe not busier, but performing many more tasks than they were 3 years ago. And that's brought some reorganization on how we're approaching our business. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. And there's no question there's times between rulemaking, task force, committees that are either chartered legislatively or by departments, that they sometimes, state agencies can sometimes strip our capability to engage. And I'm sure you see that as well. Page 12 starts to a little discussion of our legislative steering committee. You can see who currently comprise our legislative steering committee. It is 43 individuals. All 39 counties have a representative, and the 4 county executives have a representative. So, and we generally are seeing 35-ish to 38-ish members regularly at these meetings. They have been virtually held for the past couple of years. We've started to do some in-person planning meetings and other activities here recently, and I suspect we'll continue to see those being in-person and virtual going forward in the legislative session. We have 2 co-chairs, Commissioner Dean from Jefferson County and Commissioner Peck from Franklin County, our current co-chairs. They meet have been meeting and will meet one more time in November here at our conference to finalize our legislative agenda, which is really down to 4 primary issues, dealing with jails, dealing with care issues in behavioral health, dealing with, when you think about the .09 rural excise sales tax for economic development, and the 4th one, it will come to me, and I should know it right away, is federal fund swap for transportation program. So it's a pretty eclectic mix, to tell you the truth, of issues. And we started with, I think, well over 200. They narrowed it to 60 that we worked on over the session, and it ended up with these 4. So kind of an eclectic and interesting mix. So behavioral health, which is obviously important to us, transportation, which is important to us, the criminal justice system that is important to us, and transportation. So kind of an interesting element that emerged.
Can you remind me of the LSC roster, every county, I see 3 Pierce County representatives. I mean, is it 1 seat per county, or is it some kind of population distribution, or how does that determine?
Yeah, good point. In fact, I'm not sure why there's 3 there might be an alternate listed there for the executive, but so typically what happens, every county council and commission gets 1. And then an executive gets 1. An executive can appoint an alternate for them, but it also has to come from the county legislative authority. It can't be a staff member. So I suspect if there are 3 from Pierce, it's probably because one of them has been, you can actually see Brian Mello's a Pierce County alternate.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So, and then the executive would get that extra if he wants to attend.
If he wants to attend, gets it.
Okay.
Yep. And those are appointed by ultimately by our board, or confirmed by our board So it's recommended then board. And we get, from time to time, we get counties submit 2 or 3 names and the president gets to make a recommendation to the board, so. Councilmember Stevens, did you have, go ahead. Okay.
Eric, when you finally do make that final selection, if you will, of the 4 top priorities, about how many secondary issues do you follow? I mean, just too many even to name.
Well,
I'm not looking
Yeah,
for any specifics.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah, so-
wondering how you try to classify your ability for success.
yeah, that's a great question. So what we will do is these will be our priorities where we will be leading a legislative piece. And so we actually tiered these this last year, which is there'll be a whole second components of ones that we will not be the lead on, but that we will be key partners on. And so those will be kind of the next tier down that we actually look at a number of those pieces. So might be something around the Growth Management Act that we may not be the lead on, but we will be a secondary partner on and support it. Just keep in mind, about 75% of bills that are introduced in the legislature have some nexus to county government, either directly related to the services we provide, directly related to us as an employer, directly related to our organic responsibilities, whatever it might be. And so about the only thing we do not track is K through 12 and higher ed. And otherwise, we're paying attention to virtually every other committee and bills that are being introduced in the legislature. And even then, that sneaks up on us. We got bit in something in K through 12 education a number of years ago about citing public schools through the Growth Management Act, and we were supposed to be the lead on the task force, and it's like, whoa, we missed that one because it was coming out of K through 12.
Yeah.
So outside of K through 12 and higher ed, we just don't pay any attention to those elements. We probably should pay more attention to them, but we just don't. It's not something we don't deliver. We don't deliver it. And clearly K through 12 and higher ed are important components in our communities, but we just don't pay attention to those.
But in addition to the ones that we will be leading and or partnering on, there's the vast majority of the bills that are introduced that we either have to, be neutral, fight, or support, that we have no control over, but that do affect all counties.
Yeah, and we certainly endeavor can.
You take a position,
initiatives.
you take a position, right?
We take a position. We have a really good, solid public policy document that guides us. And there are preemptive things that we talk about. If it preempts our local authority, that usually bothers us. If it's an unfunded mandate, it usually bothers us. And so we'll focus on the element of a piece of legislation that conflicts with it. We may not oppose the whole public policy or the whole bill that's being proposed, but there's an element that conflicts with our policy document. And we'll be pretty clear about trying to narrow our focus down of what we do or don't like about it. Well, we play more defense than probably offense. There's no doubt about that.
But also within that process, WSAC has a great system to engage and involve all counties through whether it's WSAFO, the Washington State Association of County Engineers, and other sub-organizations. And we as a staff meet regularly and we go through those bills. And that, at least from my point of view, is very important because I can bring that back to the board and provide a perspective as to what position they could probably have based on the perspective that WSAC has. So it's just the overall component of engaging other counties is really, for me, as important tool.
Yeah, and this is really the interesting dynamic of WSAC is that when we talk about these two clients that we have, one is you as the elected officials. You provide ultimately the policy direction for the organization, both legislatively and from a business perspective. But then we have the practitioners, those folks that fulfill your obligations on a daily basis, whether it's the administrators, the engineers, the public health folks, et cetera. And we're constantly engaged with them during the legislative session as, does this work? What's your implication? What do you think your bosses would be thinking about this? They're the secondary tier that really are vital to that. And then we have the county lobbyist family. Every Thursday night, at least every Thursday night, if not more frequently, we're meeting. We're looking at the next week's calendar. We're talking about policy positions. What's your county thinking? What should we take as a position? Does this conflict with anyone else's? So we work fairly hard to be as together as we can. Now, that's not always possible.
I think that you guys are smart, that you work hard to try to change the bills, you know, rather than trying to torpedo them. You're working to like make them better, and that I think enhances your credibility with both sides. Whoever's on one side of the bill or the other, it seems to me like we have credibility and we get important changes made. And I think that's a smart way to go about it, rather than seeming like we're always trying to block things or just don't want to hear about, you know. So, I mean, obviously it's case by case, but I've seen that approach work a lot during the time that I've been on the engagement with legislation.
I think it's a big pivot we've made over the past several years, which is to not be an organization of no, but yeah, for this to work, this is what we would need.
And that proved to be extremely effective on 1152 on the new Board of Health.
Yeah.
You know, when that bill came out, it was, whoa, let's run for the hills. But it was
not
really
pretty,
through the coordinated work through WSAC is we ended up on a workable bill, really. So kudos to your organization.
And we had to remind folks to be patient through that process, because it was a long, difficult bill, and obviously not perfect in any way, shape, or form. And the bill sponsors know that. We invited them to participate at a recent meeting, and they heard the good, bad, and ugly about that. So, yeah. So our legislative priorities we talked about. So we are again. Our membership will see what those four. The LSC will meet one more time on the 14th of November. The membership will approve those four major priorities on the 16th, I guess it is, of November at our annual membership meeting. And we also go ahead.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question about that? So I know that staff have been working with different people on those four priorities and are going to be presenting more information.
Yep.
Do you anticipate that those four priorities will change, or that other things will be brought up depending on information that's brought forward?
I think the only thing that has changed is the jail one has been narrowed in focus to be a study. Yeah, it has been to really scope, I would say more of a feasibility of scoping the issue. We've identified 2.5 billion in new or remodeled jail needs.
And that's without King County.
That's without King County. That's 2.5 billion. And so we've now narrowed the scope. You know, there's a jail standards workforce that's going on. There's some other activities. And so we've narrowed the scope to say it should just be a study at this point. That's the most significant change. And we briefed the LSC co-chairs, and they are in concurrence with that. And so we actually will be sending that out as the proposal for the LSC and the membership to take a look at. Yep. The other three have pretty much stayed the same.
Does that, with the jail one changing focus, does that open up opportunities for other things to come up?
It could, but we'll see what LSC does. Yep, it could.
Eric, do you anticipate anything coming out of that study? And what I'm kind of specifically referring to is, you know, we had the Ruckle House on the Growth Management Act and stuff, and it seems like it kind of stalled out and maybe nothing came of it, but maybe I'm just not in the right position anymore to.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think we anticipate this being anything like a Ruckles House study. I think we anticipate this being a study that would demonstrate the needs that counties have in terms of remodeling, constructing, preparing a jail for the next 30 plus years. How does it relate to having behavioral health services in the jail? How does it relate to having diversion programs in the jail? How does it relate to creating a jail facility that is more prepared for the next 30 plus years? And that's the big challenge right now, as well as looking at the labor shortages that we're facing within our jails, looking at how to deliver healthcare within our jails, kind of this whole suite of analysis. Looking at, you know, the state, if you recall, the state proposed, having separate facilities for 18 to 21-year-olds, getting them out of a juvenile facility, but not having them in a county jail. So, okay, well, that's a whole nother set of operational challenges if they're serious about doing that. And before we have $2.5 billion investment in a jail facilities, let's better understand, operationally what might be coming out. Sentencing Guideline Commission is reducing sentences. If they reduce sentences, from, 1 year and 1 month to 364 days, guess what? They're gonna be in our county jail. And we're not set up to deliver the same delivery of services that were in someone that was going for 1 year and 1 month in a state penitentiary. So there's a lot of things for us that are embedded in what we think the county jail analysis should look at.
So that's interesting, because I didn't know exactly the scope of that item when it came up. I was pinching for Commissioner Mejia at the LSC, and that's an interesting point. And if it's, like in Thurston County, when I was running for office 4 years ago, jail's leadership was saying 45% of the folks in our jail had a mental health diagnosis. Now I'm being told by our jail chief it's 65%, and there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
But is that number, if that's the situation in other counties, and the state's putting tons of money into mental health, like this connects directly,
Yep.
And so I'm glad you see you're kind of taking that, trying to connect those dots.
Yeah, so I think what our desire is in a feasibility type study, or I usually use that loosely, but it's really to scope this. It is really to scope the magnitude of the issue that's facing counties in jail operations and jail capital facilities.
Even things like dormitory living, when you think about a virus outbreak and then not being conducive to being able to hold people in, where we need negative airflow, for an example. The same way we treat tuberculosis or what. So I'm hoping all that will fit.
That's our desire. This is a big tent analysis of the future of county jails. Yep. And I think it's really important, before we make an significant financial ask of the legislature, is to be better prepared to know exactly what we're asking for with the data to support that. And then our federal priorities, there's a separate document on federal priorities, so feel free to take a look at that. But on page 16 of your document, it's a little bit more about that. We started about, well over about a half dozen years ago on federal priorities.
First word I see is airport.
Airport.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in the circle, so.
You're in the circle.
So anyway, that's a funny conversation, but not for here.
And funny might not be the problem.
But it's funnier when you're looking up from the outside in. So, federal priorities became a really important issue for us. We started, when I first started with going to the National Association of Counties meetings, we would meet with our delegation, and they were largely social interactions. And that just did not seem like it was fun, but it was not really seemed like a very valuable opportunity or waste of our time. And so we started thinking about the nexus between county government and the things that the federal government was doing. And so we started this process about a half a dozen years ago, maybe a little more now, to create a set of federal priorities and this document, which is now in the midst of being updated. You have it with you, the federal issues report. We had actually added a whole new section, if you can believe this. We did not have a section on housing and homelessness in that document. And there's a big nexus between some of the funding that comes from the federal government to support homelessness and housing issues. So we've added that in, and that probably will actually merge to probably a legislative priority, one of our 4 priorities going forward this year. So in the past, there's several key issues that are going to stay active, I know, and that one of those is a Medicaid inmate exclusion, which is a requirement that from the federal government that a individual that has been incarcerated and non-convicted loses their Medicaid or Medicare benefits. And we, pick up the tab for that, and then they're released without that benefit because they actually lose those benefits. They're terminated. And that's an element that we think is grossly unfair. We are working with the state of Washington to put in what's called the Section 1115 waiver to waive that requirement in the federal law. and we've actually submitted that now, so hoping that we will get that. New Mexico did receive that waiver, and so we're hoping we will also maybe benefit from that waiver. At the very least, we'd like the benefits suspended, suspended at conviction, and or suspended so that when they're released, they don't have to reapply for benefits. So that's one of the elements that we are working on and have been focused in on. Payment in lieu of taxes and secure rural schools have been an important piece. It's not a huge amount of money for Thurston County, I don't believe. I'm looking down here, no, you're not a big SRS or federal land county. It's better than San Juan County by last several presidents, if you want to take a look. Kitsap County was one of them, no dollars. San Juan County, it's $7,000. My last several presidents, Pilton SRS have not been a big benefactor to, but many of our counties, it's going to be, it will be $40 million, if not $44 million this year to 37 of our 39 counties get PILT or SRS or both. So it's a significant amount of resources, so it will remain a priority for us as well. We are also going to add that housing and homelessness, I think, will also become one. Infrastructure will move off of a priority. We just don't see them taking much more action on infrastructure after the IIJA bill. We are going to move pandemic off of being a federal priority. We've transitioned that to just a recovery goal. And how do we continue to get resources to help us recover from the pandemic and continue to plan for what hopefully will not be another pandemic, but plan for it. So,
Can I ask from this chart, so you've got DNR timber, 6-year annual average, 5.7, that's not numbers that match what numbers we have. I mean, maybe if you added up 6 years worth, but usually ours is like 400,000 up to like 1.4 million, kind of fluctuates. Where's that 5.7?
yeah, I'll have to go back and look to see what that actually equates to, Commissioner. But that would typically equate to, I think of what they're telling us, which would be your annual revenue, but that clearly, if you're saying that's not what your annual revenue is.
So are they talking about revenue though for the whole county and all taxing jurisdictions?
Including the junior districts.
It probably is. It probably is your
So this is
entire,
not the
your
part that the
proportional,
county
yeah,
keeps.
yeah.
So the number
We keep
lodged
a
in my
very
head is
small
just the
amount.
county piece.
Right.
I think most of that's school funding.
Yeah, there's a lot of junior districts that may.
Library district gets a portion, I think the fire district, all your junior taxing districts that are.
Yep.
getting something.
Anywhere where the timber's located gets a piece.
Eric, can I ask a question about the federal priorities?
Yeah.
With the Inflation Reduction Act dollars coming into the state, when do you think that WSAC will be able to get some information about, especially on the environmental piece of that, and how counties might be able to access that money?
On which portion of the environment?
Well, anything to do with climate, so
Yeah,
if
okay.
there's, EV charging, if there's some infrastructure around that, if there is something for the built environment that the counties, I mean, I'm not exactly sure
yeah,
where the
okay.
counties might plug in.
Yeah,
so to
you know, we
speak.
are actually it's funny you start, we just talked about having Curtis Steinauer on our staff that's doing some work with ARPA, of doing both that on the IIJA, doing that on the one you just referenced as well, so that we would do this more, what's the current status and where do we expect and when do we expect a number of those programs to actually be available to us, where they're at in the process of getting into the Federal Register to comment on what the program looks like, which has been one of our challenges as well. We just did that recently on the fish passage barrier removal, which there's $1 billion that'll be available, and hopefully we're working in conjunction with the state to be able to get those resources collectively. So.
And are you hearing from anything from the state about any ARPA money or IIJA money that has been unspent that they're recapturing that might be available to other counties?
Not ARPA. ARPA, every county got the direct appropriation, so there won't be like a coronavirus relief funds that would be distributed. So ARPA, at least in our direct appropriation, went directly to the counties, so there won't be any additional monies for that. What we don't know yet is and this has been one of our ongoing challenges, is getting the state to be clear about what additional ARPA dollars will they be targeting to get out programmatically. How will that come into housing? How will that come into the food bank? The things that you're also making investments in. That's been perhaps one of the things we've been most challenged with is getting the state to make sure that we can communicate to the counties that as we're making our final appropriations, implementing our plans, how does that dovetail with that? That's been, I think, one of our challenges.
It is a big challenge. We've called the OFM directly, asking them for information on how they're distributing certain dollars and how counties can get access, and it's pretty opaque.
Yep, it has been now Scott Merriman has left, and Scott and I would go round and round. We wanted this information that we could share. We've wanted it for a long time. As you were making your original planning processes, we've been saying, we would really need to have that information.
Yeah.
But the clock is ticking really
Yeah.
for the state as well. I mean, December 2024
Right.
is coming, so the state
It
needs
is.
to start releasing that information.
And the
I think that's why we're starting to see some money get pushed out, like the money we're seeing from Department of Commerce and
commerce, broadband
certain-
resources.
Yeah.
Yep.
certain things are coming, but it's taking a while, and we never know when
We
or
never-
what's
yeah,
gonna
and what's
come.
going on, and in fact,
So-
related to the TRAP, the rental assistance.
Yeah.
They're looking at Thurston County, at least from what we see, as an opportunity because they have extra money, the other counties perhaps have not been able to spend. And being able to continue to receive the money, but we don't have that global
Right,
perspective.
it makes it impossible to either collaborate or ensure that we're not duplicating
Yep.
efforts.
Councilmember-
What I-
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Stevens.
Oh, I was just going to add into that, what we've noticed is, and WSAC is trying to get ahead of it, but anything from the federal government on grants or competitive grants for some of these dollars seems to be coming out with very short timelines for, when it opens and when it closes. I mean, it takes a while just to read through what the program is, much less try to apply for it. However, on a positive side, when you're talking about climate, I know that I spoke with Hillary France, the Commissioner of Public Lands, and DNR has a pretty good handle on what's going to go through her department. And a lot of that is on climate and sustainability. So, it might be a resource to pursue for some of those funds.
And we actually, as an agency, we were looking at working on a brownfield application on behalf of potentially the county engineers. We have a number of counties that might need cleanups, and we were looking at the potential to be the umbrella component for that, and the short time frame, even to determine if we were an eligible applicant. We ran out of time, which was a tough element. Let me, in the interest of time, keep moving. I want to turn to litigation and our amicus brief program. Excuse me, we have two active cases. That I would just point to. The first one is the Blake decision, and this is, if you recall, I think everyone is well aware of what this does. This overturned a 50-year-old law that required strict liability, that if I borrowed one of your cars and unknowingly it had some illegal substance in it and I got pulled over, I was assumed to have known it was there, therefore I'm in possession. That was overturned. We have, we're not quite sure how many of those cases actually exist, depending on which records you talk to, whether district court, superior court, whether we don't have electronic records that go back that far either. We've been working with the clerks, and certainly the prosecutors, public defenders association, representative Superior Court, Judges Association, a little bit of the auditors, as they have been sometimes the key component to payment. So it just depends on this group. Several counties were sued under the Civil Survival Project, which sought a class action suit against the state and a couple of counties. We did not participate in that case. That was represented by if you're part of one of the risk pools, the risk pools joined into that one. We then participated in a suit with 21 other co-plaintiff counties to sue the state of Washington on 3 different points. The first point, and we've had summary judgment on 2 of the 3 points. The first point was that the clerks, the prosecutors, and the judges acted as agents of the state of Washington. They were not acting on behalf of the counties. And we received summary judgment on that in King County Superior Court. The second point we received summary judgment on was counties had no control over the actions of the prosecutors, judges, and clerks. There was no supervisory control, there were no control. The counties themselves did not have any control over them. And we received summary judgment on that point. What we did not receive summary judgment on was that all cases associated with the Blake, all attorney's costs, all fees, and all future claims should be tendered to just the state. The judge did not rule on that, and that would be subject to going to full court. The state has asked for a stay on that, wanting to see what happens with the Silver Survival Project case, which is on, which has been up into the Court of Appeals now. We have not agreed to a stay. We would like to continue to pursue. We may continue to pursue that. We're not sure whether or not we'll continue to pursue the case beyond where we are at now and just be satisfied with the case. But that's kind of where we're at right now in the Blake litigation. So happy to talk to any questions. The big fear is actually the legislature has been very forthcoming in paying the costs we've incurred so far. And they're setting up a refund bureau and the administrator of the court. So we're pretty pleased with the way we have been working with the legislature on this. The big concern is claims, is what happens when someone brings a claim that they lost their house. Their house was foreclosed because they lost their job, they lost their ability to pay, they were incarcerated, they maybe lost a custody case. There are a lot of potential ugly claims that could be the financial obligations. And that's our bigger concern, frankly, right now, is why we have continued to want the state to accept full obligations and full responsibilities for any future claims associated with the Blake decision. And that's where we're at and why we continue to seek the litigation. I don't know if there's any questions on Blake at all. And then the next one, and we're close. We're in the final review with our 3 co-plaintiff counties on our indigent defense litigation, which says that the state should be is the financial party that is responsible for assuring that indigent defense is paid for. That the way they have funded this system and created the system creates inequities and lacks uniformity across the 39 counties. And we've got all of our information that we have prepared. The complaint is prepared. It is in, I think we're waiting for one more county to sign off on it, and we'll be filing it. Hopefully, I thought we would be done by October, since we had all of our communication and media information and information that was sent out to you all to be able to be prepared of why we are litigating. So when you get a call, this is not to say that we're not doing a good job. It's to say there is certainly some jurisdictions that are better amply prepared to do that and fund that, and other counties that are not. And when you need uniformity in a system like that, then we need equity. So.
Did we sign off on?
You're not one of our co-plaintiff counties. You were.
Just co-plaintiff
Yep.
county.
Yeah. There's 3 co-plaintiff counties: Kitsap, Yakima, and Lincoln are our 3 co-plaintiff counties. Yep.
Did you sign on with the amicus brief or anything to financially participate?
You're financially participating. It's in our litigation program. Yeah. And the board of directors and as authorized, the membership actually authorized this. Was one of our early cases that were authorized. Yeah. So those are kind of the current cases. And amicus briefs is really dramatically quiet. And we have not had a new amicus probably in maybe 10 months. And I suspect that is simply because the courts are backed up. There's not much moving out of Superior Courts or Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court that have been of interest to county government. It's certainly not, I'd like to think we're doing that much better, not getting sued, but I don't think that's the case. At that, Commissioner, I don't know if you want to say anything more, otherwise maybe just take the last 10 minutes to see what issues there are. We do have our conference coming up the 14th, 15th, and 16th, and I think many of you are signed up to participate in that. Up in Renton, we've got 201 with vendors and speakers and everything. We're well over 300 folks that will be there. So yeah, it's a good number. So yep.
The three of us
Because
are.
we all want to see each other in person.
We're trying to add 2 more members to your
I saw that on the
roster. So we'll
Yes,
see how that
and
works
we
out.
are going to get 2 more. I'm going to have to change my number. Yeah, we are guaranteed to have 2 more. Spokane County goes from 3 to 5.
Yep.
And they go they're on the ballot right now.
Operation of law.
Yeah, by law, they'll go from 3 to 5, and so it will be. And there was clearly discussion when that bill was moving through to lower that number from 400,000 to 300 to 250 or whatever that might have been. So, and then we have 2 counties. One county is in the Yakima County was. Voting Rights Act claim was brought against Yakima County, so they're moving to a 3-member district only election. So there'll be a 3-member Board of County Commissioners, but elected only by district now.
For which county?
For Yakima. Yeah, and that was a voting rights act.
Federal lawsuit.
Yeah, it was brought under the state law, which allows a county now to look at that as a remedy to go to a 3-member district only election. So instead of being elected countywide, primary in the district, countywide general, they're just by district.
Has there ever been if our ballot initiative fails, has there ever been a bill to try to exempt 3-person boards from OPMA? Because that seems to be an alternative way to at least accomplish one of the goals. Because I've talked to people that were around when that was passed, and they said we weren't thinking of 3-person boards. But it's been around so long.
We have brought forward not a complete exemption of your legislative authorities under OPMA, but of administrative responsibilities in extracting some certain administrative, like personnel or certain administrative type activities not being subject to OPMA, but not completely extracting you from OPMA requirements, and we don't get much traction on that either. But trying to make a separation between your administrative duties, like when you're meeting to in a work session with your public works director, like you would if you were just the county administrator, extracting you from that type of environment versus
Passing a resolution.
an ordinance, et cetera, those types of things.
We've got Board of Health now, where we're not a quorum.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, so, but otherwise, no. And then Franklin County just settled, also on a Voting Rights Act. And so they also will be moving to a system of a 3-member Board of County Commissioners elected only by district.
So that confuses me. I know, I was just gonna say that, because I'm wondering if it's a federal suit, why it wouldn't apply to
Everybody in that federal
everybody,
district.
yeah.
So it was a suit that it was actually an element. We have a state voting rights act that was passed here a couple of years ago. And so Yakima City was a federal case. The Yakima and Franklin both were actions that were brought forward through a negotiated process with a potential litigation and a settlement under the State Voting Rights Act. So, which allows an individual county on a case-by-case basis to be looked at in terms of, does your current system violate the State Voting Rights Act?
Does that mean we could look at that and make a determination
You could.
as a legislative body?
You could, but what I think you would need to determine is whether you have a minority-only district that requires an implementation of Voting Rights Act.
That is the key, it was
Our districts are drawn so that it's like irrelevant. They're specifically drawn across the stratum so that all the districts look pretty similar.
Yeah, and for example, in certain counties, they might do that very similarly, but they might bifurcate a community like a Pasco that has high minority population, and
Geographically located.
it dissipates the influence of that single
Yeah.
population. And that's what the Voting Rights Act is really trying to get at, is getting a minority-only district that could be available. And then it's elected only by that district in both the general and the primary.
So just for clarification, so like, it's interesting, so it's saying, let's say, a candidate that goes through, right, in the district only, like, that will be high in the district, but when it goes countywide, their numbers go down, and that's kind of what,
What you're trying to avoid is that that individual might do very well in their own district, and then when they run countywide, then they can no longer win. And so that's what it's meant to do, which is to craft a district or districts that allow you to truly represent your district and your population. And when there are minority-only districts where you might see a minority winning in their district but can't win countywide, that's where they're saying that type of system disproportionately affects the minority population, therefore it needs to change.
Like, let's say all the minority groups in Thurston County were in the city limits of Olympia. And then our districts basically cut in half, like half in my district, half in your district. You could make an argument at that point that if the districts were drawn, horizontally or whatever, that person would never get through. So, but it's not really the case in our county that we have that structure, but I see the point, the argument.
And I would see this in Adams County, for example. Othello, is at 85% probably Hispanic, and it's a district that's carved up a little bit. So I suspect Adams would be one of the next counties that will be affected by this.
Interesting.
We've got precedent of opposite of all that in this county, really, when you think about it. So you're causing a problem.
Yeah, so I think obviously, I know there's more change, there'll be more changes probably to Voting Rights Act as well, probably coming up as well. Ranked choice voting is clearly something that a number of folks are still very interested in.
City of Seattle has
A couple of jurisdictions locally have created that. We're hearing things from the auditors, the state auditors, or the county auditors, that they think the systems that they have now are more likely to be able to accommodate ranked choice voting than they have in the past.
There's an article in the National County News about ranked choice.
Alaska, I think, has got a ranked choice voting as well.
that's what Alaska was.
Yeah, Alaska's got a ranked.
It's on our ballot this coming up,
For your charter?
for our charter, yeah.
Other issues locally? I know we're just about out of time.
You know what I want to say, Governor? I want to say this is the best presentation. I've sat through a lot of presentations over my career. I'm going to say this is the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time and for me to be able to participate remotely today and setting that up. I appreciate it. And as I'm completing my 12th term, I must have been elected at 21.
I only know of one elected official at the county level that has had 11 terms, and that was the prosecutor out of Whatcom County, 11 terms.
Yeah.
I enjoy my WSAC work, but I have to break this trend of coming away from each board of directors meeting with a new committee assignment that I volunteer for.
It is self-inflicted.
I gotta stop doing that.
I just want to compliment you and your staff for all of the hard work and thoughtful work that you do also. Thank you again for helping Thurston County out with the Veterans Assistance and Mental Health and Developmental Disability Bill the last couple of sessions, and for including that in your list of priorities that you're looking at to support.
We're coming back on that one.
Yeah, well, it was in the mix to
We
the
got to
end.
7, yeah.
Yeah, was that what it was?
It was 4th in the next to last round of voting, and then it dropped to 7 in the final.
We want to recount.
We'll do maybe we'll figure out a new way to do ranked choice voting, just
Yeah.
one time of all 200.
There we go.
So, yeah. Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you all. Your county's really active with us and really active with our affiliate groups as well, which we certainly appreciate too. We've had leadership and presidents and all sorts of folks within the active element of those affiliate groups, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. It is 10:01.
Thanks,
We're adjourned.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you.